We'll crack on with the agenda straight away and move to item 1. Item 1 is apologies for absence. I've been notified of absence of Peter Strong. He sends his apologies. And I understand Martin Veal is currently on holidays. He's meant to be joining us, but I can't see him online currently. So we'll wait to see if he joins us in due course. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest to make at this point, please? No, I'll take that as nil return. We'll then move on please, to item 3. Item 3 is a public open forum. This is the opportunity for members of the public to make representations to this committee, either orally or in writing, or to address this committee on any relevant matter. I've not been made aware that any members of the public wishes to address this committee, and in which case, unless Richard contradicts me, we'll move on to the next agenda item. In which case, we'll go swiftly on to item 4. Item 4 is the action list. I'm really pleased to report that we only have one outstanding action, and that's in respect of the update on the ISA 260 recommendations from last year. And maybe if I take this opportunity to ask John Davis, our Head of Finance, to give us a brief update in terms of where we are in terms of addressing those recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So there were 3 recommendations that came out of last year's external audit process that we've looked to embed within the work and planning that we carried out for the 23-24 accounts process. The first of those related to non-enhancing capital expenditure. So by that we mean expenditure which does not automatically increase the value of our capital assets. We had previously allocated that to a generic asset within our register, and I think on review of that process with colleagues in Audit Wales, we've changed that, and we've embedded within our processes an allocation to the individual assets involved. What that means is that as we move on in the future, our unusable reserves will be more accurately reflected based on the transactions that are involved, and will give us greater accuracy within some of those figures within the balance sheet that we see. So I'm happy that we fully embedded that one. Recommendation 2 was around the process for collation of declarations of interests. That was a new process that we had looked to embed for what was the 2023 process, and we've made improvements on that for 2023-24 such that those were submitted in a timely manner, and we were able to hand those over as complete working papers to Audit Wales on the day that we published our draft accounts. So again, happy that that has been closed off. And finally, the third recommendation again was in relation to fixed assets and the process that we undertake to add capital expenditure prior to posting a revaluation of the asset. And again, I think on reflection and dialogue with Audit Wales colleagues, we've changed our process around that so that there's less risk of overstatement of our property values within the balance sheet. So I think to summarise, Chair, I'm happy that all 3 of those have been embedded within our processes for the draft accounts that are coming before committee this afternoon.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments on that very helpful update?
Sounds as if that's an action that could be closed off then, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's sensible. Let's close it off. Clearly, we'll await Audit Wales's sort of review of the accounts, but we'll receive that in due course. Thank you. Okay, if you could then move on to item 5. Item 5 is the Q1 sort of Treasury report. I'll ask John Davies in a minute to introduce the paper. Please assume we have read the paper. I should note that a version of this paper is going to the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee, I think in September, but I'll look to John to confirm that. So I could just remind members of what the responsibilities are in respect to this paper, noting that more detailed comments on the performance of individual assets should be discussed at the P&O Committee itself. So, John, so yet again, please assume we've read the paper, but over to you to introduce the item, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, I think the more detailed report that is going to be going through to Scrutiny Committee in September, I think, or October, I can't quite remember the date, will be focusing purely on our commercial investments. So that's just one part of the report that's coming forward today, and I'll go into much more detail around some of those individual investments that we have, the performance of those, and what makes up some of those returns that we see on those investments. So in terms of the Q1 update, pleased to report, I guess, that it's a fairly stable period in terms of our treasury management activity. That's not to say that the sums invested and borrowed have been small. As always, there's activity every day, and colleagues continue to keep a close eye on our cash flow needs as we move through the year. Just a couple of, I guess, key points to note for the committee, obviously reflecting that the committee will have read the paper. The credit score or rating, I just wanted to clarify off the back of the previous update that I would have given to committee that this is an improvement over the quarter. So it can be a little bit confusing in terms of the metrics that we show there. A reduction in the score is an improvement, and I think we should probably note that for future reports. You can see there that we've moved from an A+ to an AA-, which is an improvement overall in terms of our credit risk rating. We've seen moderate increases in our cost of borrowing across the quarter. We continue to internally borrow where appropriate. 3 million of lender option, borrow option loans were called during the quarter. That means that we no longer hold any of those such loans going forward, which is pleasing. It reduces our future risk, and we have since the report was written replaced that loan with alternative financing at a very small marginal increased cost from where the original rate was with that lender. So that is a positive. The externally managed pool funds continue to improve in terms of those income returns, and we can see there that a 5.5% income return is pleasing. It's a good diversification, I would say, against some of our other cash investments that we hold, mindful of the accumulated capital losses that continue to be held on those. And just finally, in terms of those, we term them non-treasury investments for this report, commonly referred to as commercial investments. They are due to generate a positive return for the authority during the financial year of 647,000. That's our current budgeted figure, so a 2.5% return. There's obviously variability within those, as you'll see from the section within the report, but overall that remains a positive for us, and again a diversification of income for the authority that negates the need for us to raise funding from elsewhere. So, Chair, I think I'll leave it as that. So, obviously, a fairly brief update today, but I think as these reports are quarterly now, I think they will become shorter than we've been accustomed to. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Phil, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. John, you'd be upset if I didn't ask you about pool funds, as I always do. And I think all of us, I mean, you made the comment about being aware of the capital losses, but of course, as we all know, that they only become losses if you cash them in. We've always been restricted in the past as to how much we can put in pool funds. Is it 4 million from memory? Something like that. We do very well overall, and you made the comment just now about its very pleasing return. Are there any ways that we can increase our holdings there to try and get a little bit more cash into the pot? Cheers.
Thank you, Chair. So it's something we continue to have under review. The advice that we receive at the moment is to hold on any further investment at the current time. We are continuing to see volatility, as you'll know, within markets. It continues to be a volatile period, not just in the UK but wider than that, and many of those multi-asset pooled investments will be exposed to worldwide economic factors. So it's something that we keep under review with our Treasury advisors, but we're not currently looking to increase our exposure to those, albeit our strategy does allow for further investment. I think the 4 million that you mentioned is a counterparty limit, so we could then choose to invest with other counterparties up to the limit in our strategy. So it's something we'll keep under review.
Thank you. John, I think out of interest, what is our maximum limit permissible? Okay, it's an unfair question.
You knew he was going to ask that, and you were searching for it, hadn't you?
Off the top of my head, I wouldn't know, but Dan has helpfully told me that it's 5 million for in total for those.
Okay, so we're nearly at that maximum limit then. Okay, so that makes my follow-up questions irrelevant then. But just I suppose I do note that market volatility is much reduced over the period, and bearing in mind the sort of fantastic equity returns experienced over the last several months, there was an opportunity to invest maybe a bit more, but clearly given that we're nearly at the limit, maybe that's not not particularly relevant. Are there any other questions or comments for John, please? Nope. Okay, so if we turn back to the recommendation, we're being asked to review the results of the Treasury management activities and performance achieved in Q1. And bearing in mind the papers we received, the helpful sort of instruction by John and responses to questions posed, I think we are content with the performance as set out. Okay then. We'll then move on to item 6. Item 6 is in respect of 3 sets of accounts in relation to charitable trust funds. John, could I ask you to take us through this paper, maybe sort of taking each statement in turn, but if that doesn't work for you, whichever you prefer, and then we'll then go to the floor for questions and then move on as appropriate. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. I think this will be a fairly brief input. We hold various responsibilities for the trust funds in question. So for the Welsh Church Act Fund, we are the lead trustee for that fund. And it's our responsibility to draft these accounts and bring them forward for the approval process, and also for the external audit process that will ensue on those. Again, it's been a fairly stable year for the fund. We've seen some pleasing recovery within the investments that the fund holds. I think, as you've alluded to, Chair, some of the improvement that we've seen perhaps in some of the equity markets has driven that and enabled the fund to slightly increase the payments that have been made during the year. There has been some catch-up payments during the year of account, following some unspent balances from previous years, notably by Caerphilly and Newport councils. But overall, a fairly stable year of account, and those statements go across now to Audit Wales to start the audit process. In terms of the Monmouthshire Farms School Endowment Trust Fund, a slightly different arrangement there. So the council acts as the trust administrator and investment custodian. And again, we've seen a slight increase in value of the fund over the year of account, with interest on investments improving year on year. The expenditure for the year was slightly up on previous years, and that was primarily due to the increase in grants payable. Again, I think in summary, it's there's nothing significant that is flagging within those statement of accounts that it is any cause for concern. They have gone forward to the trustee, and they considered them at their recent meeting as well. And finally, just in terms of the Netherley Hill Social Welfare Centre, this is comparatively small, but in terms of the trusts that we're talking about, for that reason, they don't require any form of audit or inspection, and following approval at the committee today, those will effectively be lodged with the Charities Commission. Income generated was up year on year from the activities within the centre itself, and overall, there's been a very modest gain within the fund held. So, Chair, I'll leave it there. I think probably get more benefit from any questions around these, but hopefully quite straightforward sets of statements for the year of account.
Yep, thank you, John. Yes, indeed, they're relatively straightforward sets of accounts, so all looks in pretty good shape. But I'll go to members for questions or comments. Phil.
Just a comment, Chair. We have been seeing slight uptakes now in applications for grants. It went very quiet at one stage. You see, 2023 is only 3,008. It has picked up, albeit nothing like it used to be. And I know there's been a plea sent out by the Welsh Church Act committee asking people to make applications. I know Councillor Webb's on that, so I don't know whether she's got any points that she wants to raise on that.
Thank you, Phil.
No, but thank you for raising that, Phil. Yes, it's really useful as a seed corn for many committees, etc., and of course, particularly for churches and repairs, etc. We welcome any grants, and I'm glad this is being publicised. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No? Okay, so unsurprising, but there aren't many questions or comments given the nature of the accounts. So if we turn back to the recommendation set out in the cover paper 2.1, we've been asked to review and comment on those accounts, and we have done so, and indeed this committee is now content with those draft accounts. I look forward to seeing them post-audit. Okay, let's move on then to item 7. Item 7 is the draft statement of accounts for the County Council. And yet again, John, if I turn to you, ask you to introduce the item, noting that, of course, we have read the paper, but please take us through the key points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Pleased to bring this forward at this stage of the year. The draft accounts for the council have been published, so they were handed over to Audit Wales on the 1st of July 2024 to start the external audit process. That was a full 19 days earlier than was achieved in the previous year, and we've taken a full nearly 2 months out of that process over the last 2 years, and I think my thanks go to not only finance colleagues on the call today, but obviously all of those wider teams that are involved in the process. It touches on many areas of the authority. I think I've noted some of them within the report: estates, HR, payroll, internal audit. So there's many inputs into what is a complex document, and whilst the statutory deadline remains at the 31st of May for completion, bringing us back to the 1st of July is no mean feat. That can't be understated to the committee. So I think, as we note within the report, we were the 7th council in Wales to publish our draft statement of accounts. There will be many of those that are still outstanding. So I think that speaks to the work that's gone on in what was a busy period for finance teams. In terms of the accounts themselves, as I mentioned, quite a complex document for us to work through. So we've provided a summary document which we hope is helpful for the committee in understanding some of the primary statement figures, as well as some of those disclosure notes that looks to expand on some of the figures that are published within the accounts. The key thing for the committee to note is that there will be a difference between the figures published within these statements and those that come forward during the year as part of our regular budget monitoring into scrutiny and into cabinet. There's multiple reasons for that, and the summary paper that we provided at Appendix 2 goes into some more detail explaining that difference. We have seen some volatility across some of the primary statements, in particular within the balance sheet, where our total reserves have increased year on year. I think it won't be any surprise to committee, because it's been a common theme over the past couple of years that one of the primary drivers for that is our liability in relation to the pension fund. That has improved, so the net liability has reduced year on year quite considerably, which has skewed the figures in the balance sheet quite considerably. As the paper explains, that is a liability there that is for the long-term funding of pensions, and the actuarial process that is undertaken can mean regular changes to that overall figure. It can be skewed quite considerably just by small changes in some of the assumptions around those. So this isn't a liability that would arise in any one single year. I think the liability that remains now is fairly small, but that is being addressed through updated employee and employer contributions into the fund. For members, it's an important area to note, because, as I said, it skews those figures quite considerably. In terms of the remainder, I think just to touch on the process that we now go through. So the draft statements come to this committee today. We are currently undergoing the external audit process, and Audit Wales colleagues are underway with all of that work and making some good progress. The expected certification date is the 30th of November 2024, so this committee will receive a updated version of the accounts that have been subject to the external audit in due course. And there will be an external audit report that accompanies that. So, Chair, I think that's the main points I was looking to cover today. So I'm happy to take any questions, noting it's a long document.
Thank you, John. That's much appreciated. Very helpful introduction. Before going to questions, could I invite Rachel Freitag from Audit Wales to confirm the audit plan and timetable, please? Over to you, Rachel.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. As John set out, our audit timetable is on track to certify by the end of November. We have a team who've just started sort of getting underway on the audit over the last couple of weeks as we come out of our NHS and central government audit work. So it's very early days. I couldn't comment on, any findings at the minute, but from a first review of the accounts and working papers, they are of the usual high quality and what I would I've come to expect from Monmouthshire over the years, in particular given that those accounts were received a good 19, 20 odd days prior to where we got them last year. So it's really pleasing to see that, because it is a hefty document. So I would like to thank John, Dan and the rest of the finance team for pulling that together. So looking on track as things stand for the end of November. Having said that, we'll keep you up to date, because it could be, if there's a national sort of sector-wide issue that crops up, or it's been known to happen in the past, or any, significant sickness or resourcing issues like that on our front, on our end, I'll keep you posted on any impact on the timetable.
Thank you, Rachel. Phil, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and it's very pleasing to hear that we managed to get another 19, 20 days knocked off the time it took to do it, and I was very pleased to hear Rachel say that the quality of the records was as good, given that the team managed to get them out so much earlier. So I think our congratulations to the team for doing that. The question I've got was, there's not many areas here that we've got a great deal of influence over, but one of them is school balances, of course. And going back during the COVID period, there were very substantial grants that came in that almost wiped out any deficit in their school balances. I think there were only 3 schools at one stage that actually had any deficit, and of course they were then encouraged to go out and spend it. But in view of that and the turnaround since, we've got a substantial number of schools in deficit, and some of the comps have wiped out any surpluses overall. Are we happy that every school in the position to have a recovery plan has got a recovery plan, and do we have confidence that they're actually being effectively enacted?
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I think you're right to raise it as perhaps one of the key balance sheet risks that we see moving forward. It's been rightly highlighted within our financial forecasts that we've brought into both scrutiny and cabinet recently. I think the first thing just to say perhaps around those grants that were received during the COVID period is that those came with specific terms and conditions that the schools had to adhere to. So they weren't simply there just to top up balances, and they've rightly used those to recover standards of learning and that time that was lost during the pandemic period. The reasons for those deficits are multifaceted. So it's very difficult to put a finger on one thing that is influencing perhaps some of those arising. There's a piece of work being undertaken at the moment to both look at the robustness of those budget recovery plans that are coming on the table, but also for the varying reasons that they are, firstly, why they are arising. So that'll be subject to further reporting as we go into the autumn through the usual process. But all budget recovery plans were due back by the end of July, and there'll be a process that we go through now to look at the robustness of those and whether they're realistic in being able to bring those schools back into a balanced position within an acceptable time frame. We are aware of the issues that schools are continuing to see, both in terms of additional learning needs, in terms of behaviours and attendance. So we know this is a complex area, and we're going to have to work closely with schools to deal with both the resources they need to meet that, but also to bring them back onto a sustainable footing as we look to their balances moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that. It'll be very interesting reading when it comes out.
Indeed, thank you. We'll go to Colin next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would just like to echo Councillor Murphy's comments regarding the comprehensiveness and how well written the report is. And it was quite a read. I can see that financially you've manage the position regarding the MacLeod judgment, but at page 166, point 14.3, where it's detailed, I just wondered if you had a time frame for that and give some sort of update on the financial liability to the council with that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We're continuing to be in dialogue with Torvine as administrators of the pension fund around this. We are due to have an updated actuarial assessment over the next 21, 25, so it'll be within the next 12 months that will make further judgments and allowances around that. I don't have a current update in terms of the progress around it, but if the committee are minded to have a response back in due course, I'm happy to bring that once I've spoken to our administrators.
Thanks, John. I was just going to say, because I know that Gwent Police have dedicated a resource to it, but I wonder, would that be Torvine under the greater Gwent pension scheme that would be making those calculations, doing that financial work?
Yeah, absolutely it would, yeah. So, if the committee so wishes, I can find out if that's something that they're looking to progress.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Colin, did you want that as a formal follow-up?
I think it seems to be a difficulty for public sector organisations to manage this, and at the moment they can't even produce a calculator. The government can't produce a calculator to work that out. So yeah, I think it might be worth following, because I think it might be a difficulty going forward.
Okay, thank you. Richard, if you could note that as an action, please, for this committee, be much appreciated. We could now move on to Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My computer's trying to do an upgrade. I'm trying to stop it. But it comes down to the question of the transition between King Henry VIII and the new school. If I remember right, there was 700,000 at the King Henry VIII stage and 329,000 at the new school stage. What changes? What's the difference? What happened there? I can't find the page. My computer's all going silly now.
Yeah,
so it's on school balances, it is.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah,
what happened there?
Yeah, I know the section that we're looking at. Thanks, Councillor. We will have made an allowance within that note for the consolidation of what was formerly the King Henry VIII and Derry View into the what is now the King Henry VIII 3 to 19 school. So the balance that was being held for both of those would have been consolidated.
It includes Derry View then?
Yes,
right,
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, please.
Thank you, Chair. A number of questions, a few little ones. But first of all, can I just say I think this is a really clear set of accounts. So I'd just like to sort of compliment the team on that it's completely intelligible even to the non-accountants among us, and to, I think, any member of the public who cared to wade through it. It's also really reassuring that not all of the reserve cover, the headline figures, that not all of that reserve cover was in the end needed, which I think, the changes to deliver greater value for money are starting to bear fruit for us. I think particularly in the areas of social care and homelessness, and also that the pension fund liabilities have reduced. In terms of that governance report, again, coming back to openness, and I'm not sure whether this is actually a question for you or elsewhere, I'm not sure that we've picked up the scale of work that is perhaps needed for the public to be able to find any information they want on our website online easily and conveniently. I'm sure a great deal of it is there, but it can be not always easy to find. And I think some other authorities may have better processes for things like consultation, in terms of having all their consultations together and a consultation calendar. So I'm not sure that we've caught in that report the scale of improvement that I believe is being worked on, let alone that it is necessary. And again, with the new style minute with a link to YouTube instead of a report of the debate, whether that gives us the clarity where effectively the definitive record is becoming YouTube rather than our actual written minutes, and whether we've looked at the long term. It is possible to know what was said in a council meeting currently 100 years ago if you wish to go and look, and I'm not sure whether that will be, we couldn't say that if we rely on YouTube. A couple of little questions, and I suspect I'm going to regret this. Impairment of heritage assets. We've got a notification that a note there that our heritage assets have actually increased significantly in value, but we still have an impairment for them. So I'm sure that's a technical question, which I'm likely to regret asking. And when were the earmarked reserves last reviewed to align with the corporate and community plan priorities? And amongst those earmarked reserves, we appear to be holding still significant, or were at the end of March, significant amounts of money for Ukrainian refugee relief. How's that? Perhaps that's changed since the end of the year, but how is it to be being used or proposed to be used? And lastly, I noticed on the related party relationships and transaction details, I know for certain that there's more than one county councillor who is also a town councillor in Abergavenny, and I believe in Caldecott too, and I think in Monmouth. So I'm not quite sure whether members perhaps were not made aware that membership of a minor authority is a related party transaction for the purposes of the statement. Sorry, that was my random selection.
Okay, there's a lot there, John, so perhaps you just answer those questions if you're able to, and then we can defer to others those questions you're not in a position to answer at this stage.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thanks for the questions. I think around the points, I think around the annual governance statement, the website and the minutes of meetings, I think what I would say is that this committee will have considered that governance statement at its last meeting. So, that is still a statement that can be amended if needs be, if those points warrant any update to that statement. I know Jan is currently dealing with that. But I think, that is something that ultimately will be signed off as part of the final statement of accounts. So I think if the committee overall felt that there was, it warranted any update, then, happy to have a look at that in conjunction with Jan. But specifically in terms of those points, I would defer to Jan on anything he felt needed to be picked up. Moving towards heritage assets, so I think in terms, you're quite right, so impairment here will be in terms of capital expenditure that's taken in place during the financial year that hasn't necessarily led to an increase in the value of those assets. So it'll be things, and this is common in terms of heritage assets. So, for example, we'll have Caldecott Castle. We may do some works on that property during the year. Doesn't necessarily mean that a castle gets an increase in value because we've done some work. So there's various things that go into our overall value of heritage assets, but that specifically were works that didn't necessarily increase the value. In terms of earmarked reserves and that alignment to the community and corporate plan, the financial update report that both Scrutiny and Cabinet received earlier this month highlighted that a further rationalisation of earmarked reserves would take place following the approval of the financial strategy. So that has now been approved by Council, and we will be looking to do that further exercise as we move through 2024-25. And you rightly point out that it's something that constantly needs attention because priorities change, and it's right that we maintain the discipline around reviewing that. In terms of the Ukrainian reserve, so this is purely an accounting adjustment. We would have received a lot of the funding from both Welsh Government and central government for that Ukrainian fund that we're administrating. Up front, we would have received it in the 2022-23 financial year, and we're carrying that in reserve and applying that over the financial year that we're continuing to incur that expenditure. So we're, I think, budgeting to draw down from memory around 400,000 from that reserve in 2024-25 to meet the costs that we will incur in supporting the Ukrainian population in Monmouthshire during the year. So over time that will taper off, but it's purely there as an accounting adjustment. And finally, I think in terms of related parties, I think we'd welcome any clarification around that. The information that we have published is based upon the returns that we've received from all councillors. The guidance that accompanies that is quite clear. So if something's been missed, we can look into that. The external audit process will also be looking at the returns that have been provided. So as ever, it's something that will be more robust as time goes on, as we look to capture some of those nuances perhaps that we do find with related parties. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Just a couple of follow-ups. In respect to the AGS, Jan, could you just follow up those points made by Sarah, please, and then reflect on them in terms of whether they need to be incorporated more fully into the draft AGS? And the second follow-up is respect of related party transactions. And for my benefit, John, do you require lay members to complete such a return?
So there's strict definitions under the accounting guidelines for those that are required to complete those. So there will be guidance around persons with significant control and influence on the authority. So as a matter of course, we won't ask lay members of the authority under those current guidelines. But I think it's I think it's an important point that you've raised. I think it's something that we can perhaps consider more fully against the guidance, because I think as lay members, influence increases within local authorities off the back of the changes to the legislation around audit committees and the various committees within local government. I think it's something that we need to monitor. So it's something that I'm happy to take back and set against the guidance that's in place to consider if we need to make any changes to that going forward, Chair.
Thank you, John. Yes, if you could just reflect on that. I don't think it's a big issue, but at least 2 lay members on this committee and at least 1 elected member is on the Cardiff Capital Region, so that may be of relevance here. And I won't take offence by being classed as insignificant, not yet anyway. Tony, back to you, please.
Yes, it's just a little information. We're talking about the intangible assets of heritage assets, is that they are not really insurable because you can't relate, particularly Nelson Museum, you can't relate an actual value to them. But I think that was before, wasn't it, Phil? You were involved in that, wasn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, we do hold insurance cover in place for some of the collection that we have, based on an independent exercise that was taken out to look at those. So you're quite right, it is a difficult area when we're talking about castles and monuments, etc. So.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments, so we look to conclude this item. But before we do, just one final question for John and possibly Rachel. For my benefit, do other councils produce a summary financial statement as per your Appendix 2?
So, in my experience, it's varied. Some will look to include that within the narrative statement of the accounts. So, the preface section to the accounts will be a lot fuller and a lot more detailed in some local authorities. That tends to make the accounts themselves run into a lot more pages and detail. So we've often found it more clear maybe for committee over the years that we bring this as a separate analysis and paper to aid the understanding. But happy to take any views on that as to what the committee feels is the most appropriate approach.
Thank you. Where I was coming from was that I was going to state that the Appendix 2 was excellent. It was a really, really helpful document, and it really sort of brought to life a more detailed set of accounts shown in the main body of the paper. And for me, it more fully met the principles of public accountability and transparency, which a point Sarah has made previously with respect to the website. So for me, it was excellent, and I was just trying to understand whether this was practice elsewhere. Based on my limited involvement with other councils, it's not. So I just wanted to add my congratulations to other members, to you and the team for the excellent work in terms of producing both this summarised financial statement, but also the main statement itself, because for me it is really clear, concise, well written, and really sort of tells a story very well in terms of how our finances are trending over time and the key challenges being faced. So overall, an excellent document, and you've already highlighted the fact that we've made significant progress in terms of not just meeting the timetable, but exceeding it as well. So well done to you and the team. It is really, really good work. Okay, if we're happy to, we'll move on to item 8, which is the forward work programme. This is just for noting, but nonetheless, I'm happy to take any questions or comments from members before we just note the forward work programme. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up, so just bear with me a moment. I'm just moving on. I think we have a set of minutes in the meeting pack, albeit I can't, there it is, couldn't immediately find them. So yet again, I've reviewed these minutes, I was content with them. I wasn't going to ask members to approve them, except by sort of anyone shouting out if they take exception to those minutes being approved. Yet again, no one's raised any exceptions. That's fine. And then finally, item 10 is just to note the date of the next meeting. The next meeting is on the 5th of September. That's several weeks away. If I don't see you before then, please have a great summer, to take time off to relax, and look forward to seeing you in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.